I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Before we move on, I would like to introduce our newest Board of Election and Registration member, Ms. Clara Hardin. She is representing District 2. Welcome to the best Board of Election and Registration in Georgia.
Thank you.
I and the rest of your fellow board members look forward to working with you to become a central part of our board. All right, moving on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any amendments or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, there being no amendments or corrections, the agenda is adopted as amended or as written. All right, moving on to approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections or amendments to the February 16th, 2023 regular board meeting? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as written. Are there any corrections or amendments to the March 24th, 2023 special called meeting? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as written. Moving on to public comments. We're limiting public comments to 3 minutes on the agenda items only. Any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the financial report. March month end. Ms. Nevels, the floor is yours.
So is everybody flipped to their? It should be under a tab, financial report tab.
Is your
And
mic
it'll
on?
say at the top right, end of month detail, account detail for March. And it's hole punched in the book, right, Dennis?
It should be everything.
Oh,
Can you turn her mic up a little bit?
and you can pull it closer. Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, is it on?
No, yours is fine. I just wonder if they can turn her mic up a little bit.
Can you hear me?
I can.
No, you can't hear me?
I'm barely.
Barely? We
Yeah.
turn it up more?
Go ahead.
All right, is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm hollering. Y'all tell me to shh. All right, so you received all of these in an email, so we'll start with any questions from the board members, if you have any. This does represent on salaries, the recent election we held in St. Mary's.
Have you billed St. Mary's yet for the special election?
Yes, sir. I billed them just under $30,000. So I haven't gotten word that we've been reimbursed yet, but that should be forthcoming soon. So it ended up being 29,000 and some change.
So that would not be reflective of in the
Correct.
budget.
That is not in here. So this is just straight out funding for our poll workers in that first section for salary that you're going to see why we're over. Part of the reason we're over so much. And let's see. If there are any other, I didn't see anything else on here that was unusual, but if you have any questions about what anything is, like UniFirst Corporation is the company that cleans the rugs throughout the building, and we share a cost in that expense.
Shannon, what about contracted services? Contracted services admin, page 2.
What page? Page 2.
Page 2.
Under, I think it's 799.
Okay, 1,500 of that was for our Easy Vote annual contract we have that we needed for early voting, and we don't need that anymore. So moving forward, we'll be able to save that $1,500 monthly fee or annual fee. I'm sorry. I'm not really sure what the extra $200 is for, though. I'd have to look into that. And
So what percentage of the budget have we used?
I think you'll find that on the last page.
Last page.
Oh, you know, this is a different report than I think y'all are used to seeing.
I remember seeing that. We're like at 65% or something like that.
So
we're right on track.
Yeah, we're right on track, and I believe we're at, we've spent about 319,000 so far. I think our budget's about 411.
Okay.
And any other questions? Really nothing crazy. The biggest thing is we did invoice St. Mary's. They've received that, and as soon as we get the check from them, I'll let you know.
All right. Anyone else have any questions for the elections supervisor? Nope. All right, moving on to new business discussion regarding precinct lines and numbers, and I'm going to turn the floor over to the election supervisor.
And Chairman, I'm sorry. I was supposed to go over real quick the updated budget
Gotcha.
that was submitted.
That's right.
The last we met, three of you were here for that. In your blue folder, you have a sheet that says budget listing. And it should be a single sheet, but it's front and back. And it's in your blue folder.
Should be after actual report and then no, it's in there. It should be in there.
It'll be in your blue folder, Miss Barbara.
I think they gave you a new blue folder. We did. How'd you rate that?
I don't think that one.
All right, put that on the budget.
If you take your last blue folder home.
Oh, you don't have that? Oh.
Okay, so if you, I know a couple of you weren't here, but the initial budget I turned in for the 23-24 fiscal year was like an increase of almost 80% over where we are right now. But mainly you've got to remember that's because next year's an election year, right? So also the biggest thing in that part of the budget that we included was 3 weeks of advanced voting at one location. And then 3 weeks of advanced voting also at St. Mary's and also in Woodbine. So I discussed that with the commissioners, and that was times 3 elections because we should have 3 elections in the early part of 24. So I discussed that with the commissioners, and they felt like our team does, our election team, that 1 week in St. Mary's and 1 week in Woodbine would be good. We were able to drop $90,000 from the budget. So we will have early voting in all 3 municipalities for any of the elections that we have next year. And then 3 weeks always at the annex and 2 Saturdays. So I was able to drop some funding from the budget. That's why you see on the updated sheet that we're down to about a 44% increase. We were able to pay our poll workers a little bit more and change the way that they are paid for election day versus early voting. So 8 to 5 is a lot easier than 5:30 a.m. until whenever you can leave that night. So we felt that we should make the pay rates reflective of that additional time. The commissioners also approved, or they agreed to that as well. So that way it'll be easier to retain our poll workers, I think. So you can see the other 2 biggest things that came out of the budget was 17,500 under election supplies, 1,400 all the way down at the bottom, 53,1118. We had 17,500 in there for cages for our equipment so that it can remain secured at the polling location sites. And that, as well as the small equipment, a few lines down, for 6,000 for our check-in printers with early voting. Those both were pulled out, and not because they won't let us get those, but because we have ARPA funds that we can use for that instead of it being in our budget. So that was great news. So I was able to pull some more money out. Anyway, you can see where we're at now versus where we were the first time we talked budget. Any questions?
Yes, for the runoff. Did the commissioners agree to all three locations for the 1 week of runoff?
That's how we had it listed, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So at the most, you
All right.
know.
Any questions? No
And now
questions?
this hasn't been approved yet.
No.
This was just what was presented and what was discussed. Also, I had asked for a vehicle, an extra type of like SUV or something to help with additional supplies that needed to go places throughout the course of an election and on election day, and for two of us to be able to be out in the field in a work vehicle. And there was some discussion about a possible cargo van, like the smaller cargo vans like our IT department has right now. And that would actually be awesome because we could roll our stuff in there and secure them, and that would work great. I didn't get an okay on that, but it's under discussion. So that was the update. I meant to give you
Okay.
all financial as well. Any
Sorry.
questions?
Nope, I don't think we have any other questions.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you
Yep.
for doing all that, for sure.
Saving us some money.
All right, moving on to new business. Now we'll go into discussion regarding precinct lines and numbers. I'll turn the floor back over to you.
Okay, so we have been looking at a few things with our precinct lines and our numbers for voter turnout. So Dennis has a PowerPoint he's going to present to everyone that we will discuss. What you see up on the screen right now is the latest where all of our voters sit for Camden County. I think, can I zoom in on this just for a second? Okay. So maybe. But we're just starting to play with GIS functions. Whoa, see, like I'm, and I know it's kind of hard to see from way back there, but just to show you, you can go, we can do a variety of things with this mapping. We can see where our precinct lines are, where our district lines are. We can see street names. We can see actual aerial footage of what's on the ground. But each of these red dots represents a property that has registered voters at it. So if I clicked on this one, and see, I can't see that from here. So it comes up with a little card, and the little card, you can scroll across and see all of the registered voters for that particular residence. And it tells us if those individuals, what precinct they vote in, what combo number they have, so basically what ballot they get, how many people are registered at that house. And I know there's so much more that we have to learn about this GIS system. I know this does some amazing things, and it can pull out details for statistics for a certain precinct. This will be, I think, super helpful to us moving forward, utilizing this year to really look at our voter roll and to make sure we have our people mapped accordingly and in the proper precincts, which we think we do, but it's a great way that we can go back and check on this. So this is going to help us do what Dennis is about to talk about. And that's looking at the lines and kind of diving into each precinct a little bit deeper. But you can see based on the numbers that are up on the screen on the left side right here, registered voters, that's how many approximately we have registered right now in Camden. This is how many are active. And then you can see, in each district, there's about 11,000 residents, give or take. That's how we redistricted everything recently. And this is the number of registered voters in each district. So you can see where the most populated districts are. This District 2 correlates with our Precinct 9. Precinct 9 is East Kingsland, or the PSA, is where we have 9,000 people alone just in that precinct. But this this map is really going to be helpful. I think you can just look at it from a distance and see where the majority of our voters reside. Not to discount these people up here, I'm just seeing, look how packed in they are on the southern side of the county. So this will be good to drill in and drill down with our precincts and how we could better serve the voters in Camden. And one of the things Dennis is going to talk about is those precincts that are overrun with voters and then the ones that have very few people show up. And how can we better mix those together to better serve the voters this next year when it's super busy. So I'm going to turn it over to Dennis now. He's got a PowerPoint for y'all to look at, and we can look at this a little bit more later.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for the opportunity to address you and to speak on the issues concerning our polling places and what we're experiencing, especially on the poll worker side. I put together this PowerPoint. I named it New Polling Place Opportunities, and the entire premise of what I'm trying to do here is to explain our opportunities moving forward into 2024. We have an amazing opportunity with there being many elections scheduled between now and the presidential preference primary in 2024. And I think we could take great advantage of that by making our polling locations and our precincts more efficient and giving voters more accessible ways to vote. So I'm going to start with precinct 10, which is North St. Mary's. In every election since 2020, precinct 10 has had the lowest percentage voter turnout of any precinct or any polling location, sorry. And that even includes precincts that are already merged. So that includes Browntown, it includes Mush Bluff, St. Mary's, and West Kingsland. Precinct 10 hasn't broken 50% turnout across all voting types. That is advance in person, absentee by mail, and election day turnout in any election since 2020. It has the lowest number of voters of any unmerged precincts since the start of 2020, and that includes those unmerged precincts. So when you add all the number of votes up from each precinct and then you look at the total raw aggregate of those numbers, you will see that the turnout from North St. Mary's is the lowest of all precincts, all 14, including Browntown, West Kingsland, St. Mary's, and Mush Bluff. And then compared to a similarly sized precinct for the purposes of this presentation, I used South St. Mary's, which is precinct 12. They have roughly the same amount of registered voters. We are paying over 200% more per voter to run elections in precinct 10's polling place at St. Mary's Church. That does not even include the setup costs of getting things onto a U-Haul, renting the U-Haul, the time it takes to put everything out. So we have a few solutions for what we can do to mediate this problem. We can contract the polling place for precinct 10. Now, what that can do, we can go at that with one of three ways. The one that we preferred in the office is the favorite, which is merging it with precinct 14. It already borders with precinct 14, the lines. It's the closest in terms of geographical distance to precinct 10, and we think the voters would be far more amenable to that larger space that we have at Three Rivers Church. The next option is merging with precinct 12, which is what we had previously. However, we no longer have access to the Salvation Army polling location, and that would cause both polling locations that we have now at St. Mary's Church and St. Mary's Welcome Center to immediately become unviable simply because of the space. We would have to search for a brand new polling location that could fit the number of voters that both of these precincts would have. And then finally, the one that we like the least is redrawing all the precinct lines to distribute these voters evenly throughout St. Mary's to where they would vote closest to their geographical distance. This would be a lot of work on the election staff. It would be, we would have to have a lot of, discussion and understanding of where these voters are, where they're coming from, where the people that are actually voting are. And just overall, we think that merging with precinct 14 would probably be the best bet. So do we have any questions from anyone on the board regarding anything that I just stated about precinct 10?
You're saying that, to merge with 14, they're the closest.
Yes. Geographically, the polling locations are the closest to one another.
What kind of backlash are we gonna have from 10, the residents in 10?
I'm not really in a position to answer that, because we haven't had these discussions in communities yet. This is just, raw numbers and what we're seeing and what we think could work the best. I don't think that it would be too negative, considering that it is geographically the closest. We have people, like our poll manager, John Burleson. He lives across the railroad tracks on St. Mary's in that subdivision, which is just 2 miles from Three Rivers Church, and he is registered to vote in precinct 10. So we have a lot of those opportunities where we can take people that are really close to that precinct and move them over. So I don't think it would be too much of a negative backlash, but again, I'm not really in a position to speak on that because we haven't had those community discussions yet.
And just keep in mind that these are simply like some of the first brainstorming sessions that staff had that we put on paper just to get us to start thinking about what's going to work best for the whole election board and the citizens that are voting.
Dennis, given that you have to have one machine for each 200 voters, are you going to have enough space with combining those two?
We believe we will, yes, sir.
Yes, one machine for 250 voters.
And that's only out of general.
Right. Oh,
So,
go ahead.
oh, yeah, I have a question about when we will come to a conclusion about what we're going to do and how are you going to notify the voters that their polling place has changed?
Yeah, that will be months away. And, newspaper, social media, probably mailers. And we'd certainly have community outreach to them via meetings and things like that. We're just right now really, really in the very early stages of coming up with some ideas on what might work better than how it's working now. Yeah, so. Yeah, they would all get new precinct cards from the Secretary of State's office, and we're not talking about implementing any of these changes until, either the end of this year or at the latest January. But we have so many days that are required for us to notify the voters. So we're trying to do it as soon as we can, but we give ample notice and take those discussions out into the public.
So I'm looking at about a September timeframe for any of this to go into effect.
Okay.
So we've got until September. I would also like to have some public hearings on this, just to get the public's input. Probably June timeframe. That way it gives them a little time. We put all the information out there, gives them a little time to come up with their questions and answers. The only thing I have is precinct 10 right now, St. Mary's Church. That is the only polling location, I believe, in District 3. If I remember correctly.
I would have to look at
Okay.
my notes off the top of my head.
Because it used to be,
Can't hear you.
right?
And, I forget what the third one, the way that you've got precincts, sort of accommodating with respect to busy counties, you're, and unless you do the last thing, what you should have done 2 years ago, you're gonna continue to have District 3 divided among 3 precincts.
All right.
2 divided among 3 precincts, and so on.
Good points to bring up during the public hearing. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, and we can sit down and
Yeah,
talk
we
with
can
you.
definitely sit down and talk about it, for sure. Anything else on the presentation?
Yeah, he's not done.
Yeah,
That was just. a
yeah, I
starting-
have 2 more points that I'd like to go over, but do we have any more questions about precinct 10 specifically? All right. So next, I believe our next best opportunity is with precinct 7 and 8. The highest election day turnout experienced across either of these 2 precincts. So that's running both precincts on all of these elections has been 24%. So we have only seen at its highest peak in one of the precincts, 24% of voters turn out to vote at election day at these precincts. The largest election day voter count for either precinct by raw turnout was 636 voters. And also, both precincts are similarly sized in terms of voter registration numbers. And if merged, would still service fewer voters than precincts 11 and 13, 4 and 6, and precincts 9. So, with that said, our solution that we think is best is to merge precincts 7 and 8. The geographical distance between the two polling locations of these precincts is the closest geographically in the entire county out of all 12 polling places that we have. And consolidating these precincts would make operations much more efficient with minimal voter confusion because of how close these two precincts are. It would not be difficult whatsoever to find a median point that we can use and that we could just say, if you live on this side that is downtown Kingsland, you just go and vote here. We're no longer arbitrarily splitting these communities. So with that said, does anybody have any questions about precinct 7 and 8?
So where would you propose the polling location is for these combined?
Again, this is just early thinking. Pineland Bank has a community room right off of Highway 40.
That's what I was thinking.
I have not addressed them. And they typically charge for that facility. So I don't know if that's doable or not. And I don't know if this is doable. This is just one of the ideas we thought was best.
Yeah, because I know, oh, go ahead.
I don't want to get into having to pay for, I know this is down the road, but paying for a space to
Right.
vote. We hit that last year, so.
No, I know. And I would ask them to donate the space.
Right.
And if they wanted to charge, if they wanted to charge, we would have to look elsewhere. So, yeah, we're not looking to be charged.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, both of those polling locations, North Kingsland and Kingsland, neither one of them are big enough to support a combined. So we'll have to look at
Absolutely.
another place. I'm just putting that in the minds of the board members, so we got to find someplace else. If we
Absolutely.
decide to go this route. Okay.
Any other questions about precinct 7 and 8? All right. The last one I have on the PowerPoint is going to be precinct 9, which is East Kingsland. Precinct 9 is the largest precinct by far in terms of voter registration numbers. It services nearly 9,000 voters. That's around 8,800 in terms of more specifics. The PSA space is one of the largest and most accessible spaces. But while it's easily accessible, there are still concerns with parking and traffic, especially being right next to the high school. And we are having voting on Tuesdays, that's school day. And those peak times early in the morning around 7 when voting starts and when the high school first lets in at 7:25, 7:35. And then at the end of the day at 3 o'clock or 2:15 or what have you, we're having that high school traffic that's going right through there. And then finally, precinct 9 consistently produces the largest raw turnout. So that's not in terms of percentages, that's in terms of just people walking through the door. It averages over 1,000 voters on larger turnout elections. That's your mainstream primaries, that's your general elections. They're averaging over 1,000 voters. So what we think is best, it seems that is to split it. We think that we have a voting space in the Kingsland Annex office that could more than capably handle every registered voter in precinct 9 that is either west of Gross Road and Middle School Road and on the other side of Highway 40. And also we got to think about the expansion that's going on in that area. We just got those new apartments that are right next to the high school. We've got those new apartments that are right across from the hospital that are going to be registered in precinct 9. Those new apartments across from Walmart that are registered in precinct 9. We have a lot of growth in that area, and we would like to split it and have most of the people that are west of the middle school and over towards that area, have them come and vote at the annex office. And then we can have the rest of the voters that are already registered in East Kingsland remain at the PSA and vote there while alleviating the pressure on those poll workers in that polling place. So,
I have a question,
yes, ma'am.
but I voted over there, in early voting, and you have a parking and logistic issue there too. So how is putting more voters there going to, I mean, it'll alleviate the pressure off that precinct, but you're creating a totally different issue right there in that area. There's no parking, there's the library, you compete with that, and side the road, that's a pretty busy intersection. So that's just a question.
So we won't be experiencing the same level of traffic that we would on advanced early voting. When we have advanced early voting, we have 2 weeks where Kingsland is the only place that you can advance vote. So that results in a lot of turnout. In the past general election, we were averaging for the first week around 2,000 voters a day. So we would not experience those types of numbers in terms of splitting it and getting those voters over to the precinct. We would probably end up with raw numbers around 1,000 or 2,000 registered voters in that precinct total. So we wouldn't experience that same level of traffic, and alleviating that pressure on PSA and getting those people to the annex, we don't believe would cause a problem in terms of traffic over at the Kingsland Annex office. Again, these are just early discussions and something that we've been thinking about, but we think that this is a viable solution.
So basically what you're saying is that by splitting this, and you have over 1,000 on election day at the PSA,
Mhm.
you're dropping that down to 500 at the annex, 500.
We don't believe that it would be an equal split.
I mean, but in the generality, we're dropping the numbers on both places.
Yes, ma'am. This would be a completely new
Which would
precinct.
still bring that number down from early voting number
Mhm.
per day.
Well, we don't know if it would specifically influence early voting.
No, I don't mean it would, I'm just taking comparatively.
Yeah,
the numbers, but,
and additionally, something that we need to think about is that of all precincts in Camden County, East Kingsland has the most early voters by far. They have the largest percentage of turnout across all precincts of early voting.
and that's gonna increase with the apartments that are coming in. I mean, the amount of apartments that they're planning on occupying is just gonna be horrendous.
Yes,
in The
ma'am.
amount of
Yeah.
voters. So I think it's good, and I agree with you on the parking there, but if you were hitting probably at that, say 1,000 or so at the annex per day, I think that's doable. I
Yeah,
think
we
it's
agree.
doable.
Yes, because like I said, we're only averaging 1,000 voters in PSA, and we're only taking a portion of those
Yeah,
voters,
yeah.
and we're moving them to the
Yeah,
annex.
yeah.
So we, if we
I
think
like
that we
that.
can manage 2,000 voters a day in advance voting, which we have been doing and doing
Yeah.
it quite successfully, we feel very confident about using the Kingsland Annex space as an early day polling location, as an election day polling location.
And another location for that side, for that populated area was Christchurch, Camden. We've talked about that. I haven't spoken with them. Again, none of these things I've
Right.
talked to these people about, and none of these are written in stone. That's just the beginning step. So, but Christchurch, Camden, but our problem is, where are we gonna go?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like on Highway 17, if we don't use Highland Bank, where are we gonna go over there? One of the churches
Right.
on 17, maybe?
Yeah.
You know, so we still have some investigating and researching to do. And to Ms. Beckham's point earlier about, we don't want to have a precinct where we have 3 different districts that are
Right.
voting there if we can help it. You know, so things like that all have to be considered, as well. So it's just a little thing, something for us to think about this year. This year is the year
Yeah.
to do it. 2020 was a difficult option.
So something else to think about. So we're talking about splitting precinct 9 and taking a few voters out of there. What is the projected growth for precinct 9 for the next 3 years? Are we just moving voters over to here to have more voters come to precinct 9, and 2 years from now, we're going to say, hey, we got to split precinct 9 again? So do we have any projected numbers on the population growth for precinct 9 for the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's something we probably need to look at before we, decide we're going to put, 1,000 voters, we're going to move them to a precinct. Something to think about.
All right, do we have any more questions regarding precinct 9?
No.
All right, so something that I did not have on this slide, because I think it would be a little bit more straightforward and less to do with the data, is the situation with precincts 4 and 6. Precincts 4 and 6 are separated, as we all know. However, they share a border, and precinct 4 is by far one of our smaller individual precincts. We think that it would be in the best interest of the voters and of our team to consolidate those 2 precincts into a single precinct. This would affect nothing about the voter experience because they would remain at the Harbor Church and nothing would change to the voter. They get a new precinct card saying they're now instead of saying precinct 4, it'll say precinct whatever. However, nothing about their voting experience would change. So we think it's best to merge these 2 precincts and to have them remain at the polling location at the Harbor Worship Center.
And they're all District 5. There's 2 ballots there, a county and a city ballot for that particular location. I think part of what we're trying to do is, one, we're gonna try to eliminate polling plate, like precinct numbers, like calling our precincts precinct 1 through 6 or whatever. We're gonna say like that would be West Kingsland precinct. So it could accommodate the whole west side of Camden, basically. Or West Camden. I mean, we don't have definites. I'm just saying we'd go to names versus numbers.
Gotcha.
We're gonna simplify everything. This is what it sounds like.
That's the goal, is to
Yeah.
simplify and promote efficiency.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm liking it.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
All right, that's all I have for y'all.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to election supervisor update. If someone could get the lights.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
I just wanted to go over just a few things. One of those is about staffing. If y'all can keep Miss Leona in your thoughts, her brother passed away recently, so she's been out last week and this week. She'll be returning next week, so we look forward to having her back. But right now we've got Deborah, myself, and Dennis as our full-time people, obviously, and then Leona will be the only one in there working as part-time through the remainder of this year, okay? So
Okay.
just to give you a heads up on what's going on there. The special election, because we only met once or after the special election, and that was to certify the results, but just to have it on record, 3 candidates were up for election and 1 was able to get 65.19% of the vote. Only 1,630 of their 12,361 registered voters turned out for that special election, so that's just a hair over 13%. The election went off with no problems. We were thrilled with our the way we used some new features in that election, something called ePulse that we use with our poll pad check-ins. Our poll pad check-ins were done differently with polling place, am I saying it right? Printer check-in stations for the poll pads. And those, I could sit at my desk in Woodbine and see who had just checked in to vote down in St. Mary's at the Welcome Center, down to the minute that they checked in. So we kept a running list. Our numbers matched every day, everything, it went well. And I have a little after action report. I'm going to talk about that more, but that was the special election numbers I just wanted to get on record. And then Jarvis is what we're using, remember, in replacement of ElectionNet. And they're still working on some things. They do updates every Thursday night. So we've seen a lot of changes. Deborah has been in there a lot. We found, I don't know if it's the transition from eNet, how they uploaded our data over to Jarvis, but Deborah's just spent the last like 4 days going through streets that were, I don't know, had two ways, had two streets, Boulevard, or Northeast Street or whatever. So those items were corrected. And Jarvis has a tool where we're able to go through and mark our street segments or particular properties as business addresses. So I have reached out to the planning office to request the business list of addresses for our businesses so that we can go in and make sure we're getting everyone, every address, because they might be in our system with a registered voter at it. We want to verify that that's a legitimate residence. And if it's not, then we put them in the business address list. And we've asked the same list of the other 3 cities as well. So that's what we're working on. And that's a little bit different than what we had in ElectionNet anyway, that I recall. So it's been, that'll be a big plus for us to have that, because we know there's people living in business addresses that reside and sleep somewhere else. So we want to get those things corrected. So, and let's see, I think that's all I had, Chairman.
Okay, did you want to go over your after action report?
Yes. Okay, you all have an after action report for the St. Mary's
It's
election in your blue folder. The after action report, remember, is part of what in our strategic plan, we decided we would activate basically after each election. Did everybody find it? Okay.
In your blue folder, you didn't get one? Okay, you can use mine.
So it's just a short and sweet outline of LNA, like that went very easily. It was smooth and quick. Poll worker training, I just kind of say that was offered twice for 4 hours each session. And we used each and every one of those people for early voting or for election day. So we didn't have to go and retrain another class of poll workers to work election day. That was helpful. All 3 weeks of advanced in-person voting were held in St. Mary's. And what we did there was, instead of like Leona usually goes to the annex in Kingsland and helps to manage those whole 3 weeks of early voting, we sent our strongest poll managers each week to run that facility. And they did a fantastic job. And Leona got to stay at the office and help get absentee ballots out. So that was a plus. Hours of operation, 9 to 5, that worked out great. We know the turnout was slow. I did pull a poll worker from each day 1 week in St. Mary's because there wasn't a need for 5 of them to sit there and stare at each other. So we're mandated by law to have 3 present, but it's really hard to have 3 without having a 4th person to cover for breaks and such. So at a minimum, we always try to have 4 people at a polling place. So 1 week I did remove a person each day that got to pick a day off, basically. Let's see, weekly voting turnout was fairly low, as we just kind of talked about. We saw precinct 10 struggle with turnout. So like, to speak to Dennis's point earlier, on election day at St. Mary's Church, only 35 people walked through those doors to vote. That's so slow. Those poor poll workers, but an additional 35 showed up during early voting, and that was over the course of 3 weeks. So I know there's a solution that we can figure out for precinct 10. Jarvis, like I said earlier, all of our numbers matched on a daily basis. We have to check that. We don't leave until we make sure our numbers match, because you start one, it just starts a terrible effect for the rest of the week. So we figure out and make sure that everything is matched in the new ePulse system, the new poll pad check-in system, and Jarvis all worked really well together. And I've already talked about the poll pad printer check-in stations. So that was the after action report as required by the strategic plan. And that's all I have.
Anything else? Any questions? All right. We're moving on to Board of Election Registration Training. And the first topic will be on recount procedures. But before we get started, I just wanted to go over, you're going to hear me talk a lot about SEB rules because we have new board members that may or may not know what Georgia State Board of Election or SEB is. I thought that would be a good idea to have a little refresher training on what Georgia State Election Board is. The Georgia legislature, responsible for creating the election laws of Georgia, created the Georgia State Elections Board or SEB. The SEB consists of a chairman elected by the General Assembly, an elector to be elected by the majority vote of the Senate and one by the House of Representatives, and a member of each political party. The Secretary of State shall be an ex officio, non-voting member of the board. And some of the duties of the SEB are contained in the OCGA, which is our little handbook here, 21-231. And here are just some of the pertinent ones. They promulgate rules and regulations so as to obtain uniformity in the practices and proceedings of superintendents, registers, and so on and so forth. They also formulate, adopt, and promulgate such rules and regulations consistent with the law as will be conducive to the fair, legal, and orderly conduct of elections. They also investigate or authorize the Secretary of State to investigate when necessary, advisable, the administration of primary election laws may have been violated. And then once they also promulgate rules and regulations to define uniform code. The SEB has enforcement authority granted in 21-2-33.1. I highly recommend that the board members look at that. They actually have the authority to remove us as a authority, and they can actually come in and take over the board if through due process, of course. And I also recommend viewing an SEB meeting. If you've never seen one, it's highly educational. You'll learn a lot about how the SEB operates and what their thought process is when they go through all these cases they look at. All right, and we'll move on to recount procedures, and
You need a clicker?
I need to click.
I can click for you while you talk.
All right,
But I was gonna tell you, we did order or a new code book for Miss McCullough
Oh,
as well as for Miss Harden. And then,
I think you have one? You have a code book?
Yes.
Yeah, she's got one.
oh, okay, well, we ordered 3 for the office, so,
Okay,
and then, shoot, I was gonna say something else about that.
sorry.
Okay, no big deal. Okay,
I wrecked her train of thought.
you did.
Dang it. All right, so we're going to recount procedures, and the authority on that is 21-2-495. That's in your code book, and then SEB Rule 183-115.03. Next. All right, there's who's eligible to request a recount. The election superintendent, of course, we can say, hey, we think there might be something wrong with the election, and we can demand a recount or do a recount. Political parties and a candidate can also request the recount. And then a candidate must have lost by 0.5% of the total votes to request a recount. It has to be done within 2 business days following the certification of election results. Next. All right, just a few more procedures. When we get ready to do the recount, we have to put up a test deck, and the test deck shall be prepared to include at least 75 ballots marked by the BMD and 25 absentee ballots marked by hand that were actually cast in the election to be recounted. And if there's 3 different precincts available, we should use ballots from 3 different precincts. Okay, next. Just a few more. It's all in your book here. Highlight of is if after testing all available ballot scanners and there are no ballot scanners authorized to be used in the recount shall be conducted by a manual hand recount. That's the only time that we will do a hand recount, or if we have a judge tell us we have to do a hand recount. And of course, the recount shall be open to view of the public always. The tabulation of ballots must be completed through a precise control process. And a clear audit trail must be maintained at all times during the recount. Next. And this just talks about overvote. Just like an election, we set the scanner up for overvote. And that actually goes through a committee that looks at to make sure that we meet the voter's intent. If the voter says, hey, I want to vote for this person, but I made a stray mark, we can look at that and say, okay, the voter intent was very clear. So just in the recount, we have to do the same thing. And it also must put on their recount duplicate on there. And it used to be we had to use red ink for everything. That requirement has been rescinded as of the beginning of April. They went back through, SEB went back through and looked at all their rules and said, hey, we're going to clean them up a little bit and change some things. This just talks about duplicate ballots also. More duplicate ballots. And then a recount shall be conducted by a manual hand recount only following the rule of SEB or pursuant to a court order.
Yeah, and if you remember, we had to do a recount after the 2020 election for the presidential race. So I think we're on to the next PowerPoint.
Actually, I have some questions.
Oh, sorry, that's right. Never mind.
I'm going to see how effective my training was. How many ballots are in the test deck? How many ballots are in the test deck? No, it's not 75.
Uh-oh.
100 maybe?
It's 100
It's 100.
75 and 25.
Right, it's 100. All right. Who can order a hand recount?
Judge.
A hand recount.
Oh,
So there's only 2 times we do a hand recount, right? If our scanners don't work, or if a judge tells us we have to do a hand recount. That's the only time we'll do a hand recount. Otherwise, everything goes back through the scanners. Okay? And what is the percentage that may trigger a recount, and what is a time frame to request a recount?
1%, 2 days.
Half of 1% and 2 business days after certification. Well, I would say my training was about 50% effective.
that's excessive.
All right, all right. One more training topic before the polls open, and I'll be also facilitating this. Y'all just must love to hear my voice because I get a lot of training. Maybe it's because I need a lot of training, I don't know. All right, before the polls open, SEB Rule 183-1-12.10, and the PowerPoint's also in your packet here. All right, before we do anything at the polling location, we're going to administer the oath of office. That is the very first thing we do. The manager gets their oath, the assistant manager gets their oath, and all the other workers. You don't do anything in that polling location unless you have signed your oath. Very important. Let's see. The setup shall be performed in public, and the public may view the setup subject to such reasonable rules as the election superintendent has provided. Okay, so once we unlock the door to let all the poll workers in, the doors will remain unlocked until the last person leaves the poll. The last poll worker leaves the poll. Next. This goes on to talk about the poll officer shall verify that all the seals on each of the equipment is sealed up, and then they'll verify that there's no tampering, and they'll verify the numbers. Next. If a seal number does not match, or if any evidence, indication of tampering, the election superintendent shall be immediately notified of such component, and such component shall not be used until such matter is resolved. I think there was a couple of elections ago where we did LNA and one of the machines did not get set back to 0. So just a matter of coming back down there, verifying LNA was completed on it, and the resetting the machine to 0. The poll manager shall check the electronic poll books, electronic ballot markers, and ballot scanners, and indicate 0 counts prior to the opening of the polls. This is very, very important. This will make a SEB, their little heads blow up if you don't do a 0 tape before you start an election. Okay, there's the poll manager and 2 witnesses who have been sworn as poll officers shall sign the 0 tape from the ballot scanner. The poll manager and those same 2 individuals or witnesses shall then confirm that the ballot box is empty. And then they will fill out a form, and these forms are available, and everyone, all the poll workers get one of these. It's a poll worker manual, tells them how to fill it out, everything. And I suggest if you don't have one for your own use, please check with Shannon. She'll get you a poll worker training manual. And it just goes on to talk about what the poll manager is supposed to do with the forms once they've been filled out and sent back. No, there should be no reason the ballot box is ever open during the election. And if it is, there's a procedure on how to do that. And also forms that have to be filled out. Okay, the poll officer shall affix a card of instruction for voting within each voting booth and shall place at least one printed sample ballot and at least one voting instruction poster approved by the Secretary of State outside the enclosed space at the polling place for the information of the voters. At least one printed sample ballot and one voting instruction poster shall be posted in the enclosed space. So before the voter comes in to vote, they're going to see a sample ballot, they're going to see instructions. And once they get in there to vote, they're going to see not only on the machine, they're going to have the printed instructions on how to vote. It's also going to be posted throughout in the enclosed space along with the sample ballots. All right, and then the polling officer shall ensure that they have sufficient supply of sample ballots available should voters request to review them while voting or reviewing their ballot. Next. And the poll manager shall post a sign that informs voters that ballots shall not be removed from the enclosed space. So if we have a voter that decides they need to take their ballot out of the enclosed space, what happens? Doesn't count. It becomes immediately spoiled. So one of the times I was looking at the SEB, they were doing a board meeting, and one of the boards, I can't remember what county it was, some person took their ballot out of the enclosed space, brought it back in. The Board of Election Registration got together and said, yep, we think that's fine, and let them go ahead and vote that vote. Yeah, they got a letter of instruction, and the Attorney General actually got involved in that one. Because the rules are very clear that once it leaves the enclosed space, it cannot be counted. And of course, poll watchers, accredited poll watchers must be able to observe the polling place setup process. However, they may not interfere with the setup process. Now, it says poll watchers, but the general public can come and watch the setup and the tear down of the polling location. We have zero issue with that. In fact, it's authorized by law to do that. We encourage it. And next. Okay, when do the doors to the polling location have to be unlocked?
After they've administered the oaths.
After?
Before.
Before. Yep, because we want the public to know that they've done their oath. All right, how many people signed the zero tape? When do they sign it? And who are they?
Two and all.
There's three people. Who are they?
Two witnesses.
The manager and two witnesses, and everyone's done their oath. Okay, when do they sign it? At the end of the night, beginning of the day? At the beginning. As soon as it gets printed out, they sign it. Okay, what number count should the electronic poll book, electronic ballot marker, and ballot scanners be at prior to the opening of the polls? 0. And how many people verify the ballot box is empty, and who are they? Three again. This is the same people that signed the zero tape will also verify that the ballot box is empty. All right, I think that's, oh, what happens if a seal is discovered missing from a piece of equipment?
They notify the superintendent.
Superintendent.
Okay, the superintendent gets notified. And then what happens?
That piece of equipment goes out.
So the seal is completely missing.
And it's no good.
Okay,
So it has to be replaced.
so it has to be replaced. So it'll be taken out of service and replaced. It could actually be LNA'd right after that. But I wouldn't if it's missing a seal. I would get that investigated immediately. Okay, where must sample ballots be posted?
Outside.
And on machines. And the closed, outside in the closed space and the machine.
Right, so it's outside before the voter goes in and on the inside when the voter's in there voting, okay? And when do the oaths have to be administered?
First thing.
Beginning.
Very first thing. Anyone else have any questions? All right, I think we did 100% on that one.
Much better.
Much better. Glad you guys were paying attention.
The first one woke us up.
Yeah, the first one looked at, what, does this guy know what he's doing? All right, so moving on to important upcoming dates, our next regular scheduled meeting will be May 18th, 2023. And Memorial Day holiday is Monday, May 29th, and all the county offices will be closed. And additional public comments. Please state your name and can be about anything, does not have to be on the agenda.
Yeah, my name is Mary Beckman and I live in District 3. I just want to reiterate that as you think about what to do about polling locations, what to do about precincts, that for a long time now, we've had precinct boundaries not being contained within districts. So we have precinct 1 and 2. They're both within District 1. We've got precinct 5. Harriet's Bluff is in District 2. But I don't, and possibly the Downtown District is in District 5. But I don't think any of the other precincts are contained solely within one district. And you would not believe how much havoc that has created. Every time you go on the Secretary of State's election night results site to look up how many people voted in a particular district for a particular, district commissioner, District 2 commissioner in each of the precincts that are in District 2, say, what you'll get is for the precincts that are not wholly contained within the district, they're going to allocate all of the people who voted in that election so that it looks like many more people voted in a precinct for a county commissioner than could possibly have voted, because it adds up to more than there are people. So it causes confusion in that way. And this is something that you inherited from your predecessor. You inherited it from probably the probate judge going back long before Judge Sweat. And it's going to continue to cause problems, as it did in the redistricting after the census in 2010 and the redistricting after the census in 2020. It's just going to cause problems going forward until that gets fixed, so that each precinct is contained within only one district. When you think about the problem that's going to cause right now, as you think about splitting precinct 9, precinct 9 covers both District 2, and because the people in Harriet's Bluff rose up in an uproar and said, we want to stay in District 2, the people in District 2 that were west of Gross Road, that community, which is this community of low-income housing on either side of Gross Road, that community got split in half. Half of it is in District 1 now, half of it is in District 2. So when you go to think about, if you're not going to, bite the bullet and finally fix this problem, when you go to split Precinct 9, please consider the neighborhoods, because those neighborhoods are people, many of them, they need to be able to walk to the polling location. So if you're going to split it into half of the precinct, one precinct is going to vote at the annex. Think about how that neighborhood, that contains many older people who really would like to walk to the polls, and think about putting it that way. And of course, that's incompatible with fixing the problem. So I wish you good luck.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Any other public comments? Yes, sir. Please state your name and your address.
How's everybody doing? My name's Kenneth Jackson from the St. Mary's area. I actually have a two-part question. They're both a little different from each other. The first one, I've noticed a rise, and I've done a little research of about 6% in the St. Mary's area, and 0.6% in the St. Mary's area annually. And with that rise, and we've talked about numerous items here, and I know, I believe one of the districts were mentioned. I just wanted you to take into consideration this rise before you start merging these items. I listened to this young lady speak, and I agree fully with her. So I just wanted to kind of mention that portion there. I don't know if you were familiar with that or not. The second portion is election days and early elections and things of that nature. I'm a full-time student, a full-time employee. And I find it very difficult to make it out at the times that you guys have, and I actually have to take time off of work, lose money in order to go vote. I have no problem doing that because I believe the votes are very important. But my request would be something to maybe extend it maybe an hour, if possible. Instead of closing at 5, maybe close at 6, because it's not just a problem that I deal with. I have many friends and other employees that I work with that deal with the same thing.
Yeah, I think I'll address a little bit. I think we finally decided that on the budget, we're just gonna bite the bullet and we're gonna spend the money if we can, if we get approved, to actually make voting easier for advanced voting for everyone. More locations, more time. Okay? Any other public comments? All right. Time to adjourn the meeting. Is there no objection? Oh, if there is no objection, this meeting will adjourn. Since there is no objection, this meeting is adjourned.
Remember that, and that's kind of a poll worker book.
What?